Hello, this is Mark Sinakuri, and now I'm going to be sharing some memories that I remembered about Harold and Helen Little, who were my neighbors in Lawrence, Massachusetts when I was born. Harold and Helen had lived in my Wilmot Street neighborhood before my parents arrived there in the late 1970s, in 1978. I think they were there all throughout the 70s, maybe even into the 60s, late 60s. I know they were living off of Park Street, they had said, and then at some point they bought the house across the street from where we lived, at some point, and they lived there, I believe, in the 60s, late 60s into the 70s and 80s and early 90s. Harold and my dad hit it off in a snap. Harold was an auto repairman. He had his own garage with his brother David in Lawrence on Jackson Street, I believe, or somewhere. But then by the time I was born, they had a garage on Jackson Street, like right near Irving Avenue. And Harold knew everything about cars. He knew how to open cars if the doors were locked with, what's it called? Clothes hangers. He was a magic magician with cars. He knew everything about automobiles. He knew a lot about repairing appliances, and that's what my dad and him did a lot over the years. Like in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, you would find them downstairs in my basement fixing stuff. The washing machine, the burner, the water heater, the this, the that. And because my dad and Harold, they were very good with cars and appliances. And those are two things I'm not good at. So I feel worried that someday, when I'm all alone, I don't know what to do because I'm not as skillful as they are, or they were at the time, with those things. So like I said, Harold and my dad loved working on stuff together, appliances, cars, you name it. In fact, the day before I was born on August 15th, 1982, my mom was cooking like spaghetti in the kitchen, and my dad and Harold were working on my dad's Oldsmobile in the driveway all afternoon. And I think he had his German Shepherd King with him in the driveway as well. So the day before I was born, the last people to see my parents was Harold Little. And after I was born, the day I was born, ironically, Helen, his wife, was in the hospital as well. She called my mom and said, Rosemary, I had a heart attack last night. So she was recovering from a heart attack while my mom had just given birth to me. And then I went home, and oh my God, Harold and Helen, they had spoiled me like a grandson, like I was their grandson over the years. My mom told me a few years back, every day with Harold and Helen, it was like Christmas. They were always very giving people. They loved parties, hosting parties, getting things for people, gifts, trinkets, you name it. They were always there doing stuff like that. Helen loved to host parties, and Harold loved a good time, and he loved his liquor. In fact, one of my earliest memories I have is when I was about 4 years old in my bedroom. I believe I still had my crib at the time. I was sleeping in a crib until I was 4 years old, almost 5. The floor, I remember I had a big floor, and I was playing with my toys in the kitchen, in the bedroom, and Harold and my dad had worked on something downstairs in the garage or in the cellar, and Harold had one too many drinks, and he was flicking peanut shells on the floor. And my mom was like, oh my God, I gotta call Helen. So Harold was kind of like drunk in the kitchen. And then he came into my bedroom and he started rolling on the floor, and I started rolling on the floor. It was hilarious. That's one of the earliest memories I have of Harold Little. And then Helen came over and she was all upset. You goddamn son of a bitch, jackass. And she was like that. Whenever Harold would do something like embarrassing, she'd always have that kind of attitude toward him. But it was in a loving way. It was in a funny way. So that's the earliest memory I have of Harold and Helen. Another earliest memory I have of them was maybe around 1984, 85. I remember I was downstairs in their cellar, and my dad was working on something with Harold, and we got all grease all over our hands, and Helen gave us lava soap to wash off with. And then other than that, my earliest memories I have, I was about 3 or 4 years old. We'd always be on the porch over the years in the summer. Neighbors would go on each other's porches. So I remember in the summer months, they'd invite us over and we'd be on their porch every single summer, hanging out, eating watermelon. We'd be on the porch with Helen and Harold's relatives, Lisa and Kenny, and Jane and Mickey, and then their kids, Matt and Luke. And then there were also tenants that lived there, the Weefers, Joan, Helen, Tom, and Amy. We'd always converse on the porch all the time, every summer. That's the earliest memories I have of Harold and Helen during my early toddler years. Harold and Helen had a camper, a Lindy camper. It's called Lindy. Lindy, I think it was. And I loved going inside of it. One time we went in, me and my dad, Harold and Helen, and we went to a yard sale. They loved going to yard sales. It was around 1987, 88. And I remember after that, we went to some flower farm and we bought manure. And Harold and Helen, we went to a sub shop. So that we had just bought subs and we were eating them in the trailer. And I remember I got so sick because of the smell of the mulch that was in the flower garden. That I threw up. That's another early memory I have as well with Harold and Helen. Harold and Helen had always had pets around them all the time. Dogs, cats, parakeets, you name it. The earliest pet I remember they had was King. It was a dog. It was a German Shepherd. I believe it had died when I was a little baby or a toddler. And then they had a peekapoo dog named Tiffany. And they had her all throughout the 80s, late 70s, 80s, and early into 90s. And she had eczema, so she'd always scratch. And my dad and Harold, they'd be laughing, looking at her in the street. She'd be scratching her butt on the sidewalk and on the pavement. It was hilarious. Tiffany was a black-colored dog. She hated people picking her up. But the only one who could was, I believe, Helen. And the same thing with Helen. She had a cat named Freedom, a gray cat named Freedom. Freedom was antisocial. Freedom was found in the streets, I believe. So the only one who was able to pick up Freedom was Helen. Freedom hated me when I'd pick him up. But then I remember when they were moving to the Fortuna farm in 1992, they left Freedom behind in Lawrence. And I saw him a few times, walking the streets, 93, 94, 95, and then I think into 96, and then I never saw him again. He would walk around Holy Trinity when I was at school, outside in the parking lot. And I never saw that cat again. So I think it must have died around 96. Harold and Helen loved flowers. They loved landscaping. They had a nice house with a huge wall in the front and fountains, cherub fountains. So they told my dad, I believe in spring of 1989, we're going to make some structures, some ball structures on each side of the wall. So my dad made them by filling beer kegs with cement. And that's something that's memorable because those balls are still there today. One memory I have in summer of 1989, shortly before their grandson Kevin's birthday, my dad and Harold drove to his daughter Kimberly's house in Chelmsford to work on some project there. And then Helen and I met up with them over there. Helen drove me over there in her light blue Oldsmobile. And we were reading all the street signs one by one in Chelmsford, I believe it was, or one of those cities. There was 1st Street, 2nd Street, 3rd Street. And we had just gone to the pizza store to buy pizza for them, my dad and everybody. So that's a memory I have of them, of Helen and me. And then in summer of 1989, I believe it was, we celebrated Tiffany the dog's birthday. I believe it was around August. So Harold, Helen, Tiffany, my parents, and I went to Finn Dyson's for ice cream in Methuen. I clearly recall us going in the trailer. My dad and Harold sat in the front, and my mom, Helen, and I sat at the table, and we were just amusing ourselves. We found this little tennis ball, on the table. So we were just rolling it around to each other. I mean, it was 1989. We were all laughing, having a good time. That's the memory I have of when I was 7 with Helen. And then in 1989, we kind of separated from my dad's side of the family. Things weren't going as smoothly as they were in the early 80s. So for Christmas, my dad didn't want to go to my grandmother's, my nonna's. He's like, we're going to stay home. So Harold asked my dad, he goes, what are you doing for Christmas? And he goes, well, I would be at my mother's, but we're staying home this year. Things aren't that well with the family right now. And Harold goes, we're hosting across the street. Come over. So I remember we all got together. Actually, no. We went to Helen's daughter Charlene's house at Woodridge in North Andover. In Christmas of 1989, when I was 7, they had it there. Harold goes, come over. The whole family's going to be there. And friends, come over. We don't want you guys to be alone. I remember they had a piñata for all the kids. And I think their grandson Ricky broke it. Ricky. It was a good time. We all had a fun time that night. And then in 1990, for Christmas of 1990, the same thing happened. My dad said, we're not going to go to his mother's. And Harold said, hey, we're having Christmas over here. Come over, across the street. So they went across the street. We went across the street and we had Christmas at Harold and Helen's, Christmas 1990. And then in either 1989 or 90, it was Harold and Helen's 25th wedding anniversary. I wasn't able to go. I was too young. I mean, the daughters planned it, so I don't know if I was able to be invited. I'm sure they would have liked me to go, Harold and Helen, but I was too young, so I was only 7. But I saw it on VHS. When they did the bouquet and garter, my parents got up for that. And my dad caught the garter. And then my mom, she goes, I don't want to get up and do the bouquet. So Helen goes, Rosemary, you two, get up here. So then my mom gets up. What did she do? She caught the bouquet. So that's a memory I'll always remember about Harold and Helen's 25th anniversary, which I didn't get to go to, but I got to see it on VHS. And my parents caught the bouquet and the garter. And then in summer of 1990, it was either, I believe, July or early August, Helen went shopping. And she always loved to go shopping and buy stuff for people. And she comes out of her car, she goes, Marky, here, this is for you. And she gave me like several different kinds of candy. She gave me a Mickey Mouse sprinkler thing for the hose. It was, it was a surprise. I'm like, oh, this is fun, She was always like that. She'd always have presents to give to her grandchildren, friends, family, everybody. One memory I have of our neighbor George Haddad with Helen and Harold is as follows. My dad, I don't know if he was there, he walked off, did something in the yard. I was hanging around Harold, Helen, and George, and Mary, George's wife. They were all like near Harold's house, and George picked a flower. He picked like a dahlia on his front property. And he goes, here, Helen, this is for you. So then he goes, Harold, I gave your wife a flower. Now you give my wife a flower from your garden. So Harold had a little petunia. He picked it. He gave it to Mary, and Mary's like looking at it. And she goes, okay. She put it in her hair. We all started laughing. I mean, George's flowers were towering like my dad's. Harold had nothing in the front. He mostly had bushes. And then New Year's Eve 1990 into 1991, I recall we spent it upstairs at Harold's daughter Lisa's house and her husband Kenny's. Harold, Helen, me, Lisa, Kenny, we were all there. Little Harold, their son, his girlfriend at the time, Kristen, and I forget who else. There were so many people there. We were upstairs playing Jenga the whole night, and the adults were drinking. And I remember Harold's girlfriend, Kristen, at the time, had to keep getting shots because she kept messing up with Jenga. And then in February of 1991, Harold bought Helen Princess, a German Shepherd. I believe it was for Valentine's Day or around that time. And she became one of my favorite dogs ever. Sadly, when Harold and Helen moved to the Fortuna farm in Andover in 1992, Princess was killed right after that. She ran to the road and was killed. I remember Harold came by one time to drop by and check on the house, and I asked, how's Princess? And he goes, she's dead. She got hit by a car. I just went to bed crying that night. I had never cried over anyone dying. That was the first time. It was early 1992, like in the spring. I was 9 years old at the time. And then the farm in Andover. The farm in Andover began in spring of 1992. Well, Harold and Helen had moved to the Fortuna farm on Andover Street in early 1992. It was like in January. I remember it was snowing out really bad or something, and all the family in that month, that day, that night, they were bringing everything out into the car, all their cars. They had a big family, so they were all helping to move Harold and Helen to the farm. Helen's aunt, Mrs. Fortuna, was aging in years. Her husband had died like a couple of years before, and they gave the house to Helen, the farmhouse to Helen. So Helen and Harold moved there to take care of it and to watch over Mrs. Fortuna, and before she was too old to go to live there anymore, and then she went to the nursing home, like around the mid-90s. So I remember helping out. Me and my dad went there. We'd help out. We were removing all the old fencing, and because they had horses there in the olden days. We were moving the fencing. I even got a scar on my arm because of the twine of the wire. And then Harold and Helen put in the pool. They put in like a 32-foot long by like 18-foot wide pool. Oh my gosh, that was the best thing they ever did. Everybody was there swimming in the summers, and then they got a dog named Vicky. Their neighbors across the street left Vicky, the Doberman Shepherd, with them when they were moving away. So that was another German Shepherd I got to know. And my dad would make gardens up on the hill from 1992 to 1996. He'd make all his gardens up on the hill there, and he'd share the product with Harold and Helen and everybody else. But then as time went on, the pesky the gophers would eat the plants and everything. So little by little, my dad got fed up, and Harold and Helen got fed up. They're like, nope, no more garden. That's enough. After 1996, that was it. They tried getting Vicky to chase the gopher in the hole, and we tried smoking it out, but it always got away. And then they got goats, Brian and Paul. And Harold tried neutering them with elastic rubber bands and I think plastic wrap. He goes, oh, I neutered them myself. It was hilarious. And I remember my dad would plant kagootsalongis, these long zucchinis. And then Helen took photos of me with them in her kitchen. Other than that, then the dog Tiffany, like I said before, but dog Tiffany was there in early 90s, 92, 93, 94. She died around 94, I believe. I remember she had died shortly after they moved in. And then Tico, it was a Chihuahua. It was Mrs. Fortuna's dog. That dog died too. Both of them died around the same time. And then they adopted Vicky right after that. And then Vicky, I believe she passed away. I forget what year that was. I don't remember when she passed away. It was before the late 90s. I remember Lulu the dog was there. It was another Doberman Shepherd. And all that dog would do was bark, 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 bark. So Lulu was there like in the late 90s to like, I don't know, early 2000s. And then I lost touch because I didn't really go anymore in the early 2000s or on. We'd go once in a while, me and my dad, to visit. And then one time, I remember Helen and I went to a convenience store. It was in South Lawrence, near where the laundromat is over there on, I forget, Parker Street or whatever. And some guy said hi to me, like the clerk. And she goes, Marky, that guy said hi to you. And I was like, uh-oh. I'm like, Helen, did I do something wrong? She was kind of like upset. I'm like, I don't know this guy, do I? Oh, the guy goes, I'm Eli Kazi's brother. I'm like, oh, that's who you are. So I'm like, oh yeah, Helen, I know him. And then, so this is the mid-90s, and then one of the last memories I remember going in the late 90s was Harold had converted old home movies from like the 50s and 60s at the Fortuna Farm when Helen was a kid to VHS. And I remember Harold going, woo, who's that beauty on the screen? Every time Helen would be on the screen with her bathing suit and her cousins would be like playing with sprinklers as the kids, Harold would go, what a beauty, what a hottie, woo-hoo-hoo. And we were all laughing and cracking up. So as the early 2000s happened, I was going less and less because I was in high school, the late 90s, and in the early 2000s I was in college. So whenever I'd go, the grandchildren, they had so many grandchildren, but when I'd go, the grandchildren were getting older too, so they were busy with sports or school or whatnot. So when I'd go, it would basically be just Harold and Helen once in a while when we go. But my dad would visit more than I would because, I would always be in school, in college, going to the dorm, at Merrimack. And then before I graduated, I remember seeing everybody. I remember seeing Harold and Helen before I graduated, when I lost all the weight in 2004. And then 2005, when I got into UCLA, they were very excited for me. Harold was like, "Oh, you really grew up. You'll do great. You'll do okay. You'll be fine in LA." And that was 2005. And that was the last time I saw Harold alive in person. Because after that point, I mean, he had been on oxygen. I know, like I believe it was 2004, he was in the hospital for something. And when I had my tummy tuck in like December, he was also in the hospital. Like when my dad had his heart attack, Harold was also in the hospital for something. But he survived. And I remember the last time I saw him was in 2005, in August, and he had oxygen. And that was the last time I saw him. Because I rarely came home much. And when I came home, it was just, I see my parents and I go right back to LA. So Harold was born on November 14th, 1931. And he lived to November 13th, 2011. He was 79 years old. He was just a day short of 80 when he passed away. And then at times I'd see Helen shopping at Walmart or wherever, Market Basket. Helen was born April 5th, 1932, and she passed August 6th, 2021, to 89. And when Harold passed, I was in LA. Unfortunately, I was doing jury duty. I was at the court doing jury duty when he passed away. I would have loved to have been there for his wake and funeral because he was like a grandfather to me. And then I had moved home in 2019, and Helen was just short she died in August, like 7 months short of her 90th birthday. So when she passed, I was able to attend the wake, and Harold was there, his urn was there. So it was like I was there for both of them. Like, even though I missed Harold's wake the first time around, his ashes were there, and Helen was there in her coffin, and it was like I was there for both of them. And it was sad because I was remembering all the memories over the years, all the fun memories, like when he neutered the goats, or one time there was a fun memory of, it wasn't a Harold Helen memory, it was a memory of Helen's daughter, Midget. One of the cats was in the driveway meowing in the summer. And I said, "Why is she meowing like that?" "Oh, she's in heat." I'm like, "Yeah, it's kind of hot out." And then she was like, wants to mate. I'm like, "Oh, okay." I thought that would could have been. I was 13 at the time, so I was like, so I was thinking of those memories, with that, and with Harold with the, neutering the goats, and with Helen calling him a jackass when he get drunk or whatever. So, and that made me smile. So those are some of the memories I have of Harold and Helen. And Helen was Polish, so they call her Butchie, and they call Harold Grampy. So Harold and Helen were like my Butchie and my Grampy. And they were mother and father to practically the biggest family that I've ever known in life. I know Helen was married. At a previous marriage, she had several kids that were around my parents' age. And then when she married Harold, she had 5 more kids. And these 5 kids, were in their teen years when I was born in 1982. They were mostly around maybe like 12, 13, 14 years old, 15 when I was born in 1982. So then those 5 kids, some of them were having kids of their own when I was a baby and when I was a toddler. So I got to be around all of their grandchildren growing up in Lawrence on Wilmot Street and then at the farm in Andover. So there was always a grandchild around. There was always a son or a daughter around every single day. They had so much family. They're the biggest family I've ever known, the Littles. They may be little by name, but not in abundance. They had a lot of family members. And they were always known as Butchie and Grampy. So Butchie Helen and Grampy Harold. And they were like grandparents to me. Like I've said before, they'd always be there for people. They were always friendly. Helen would always host parties and tell jokes. And Harold was always great at fixing things and lending a helping hand. And they treated me like a grandson. A couple of memories I left out of this was, I believe it was the summer of 1987 or so. I was about 4 or 5 years old, almost 5 or so. My parents, I believe, had to go to a wake or something, or a funeral. I don't know. They had to go somewhere. And Harold was elected by my parents. He said, "Do you want to watch him? He could stay home. You could be at the house and watch him." So Harold came over. I watched stuff on VHS. And then Harold goes, "Marky, we're going to go out. We're going to go for a walk." So we walked down Wilmot Street, and then we walked down Avon Street, and we went right toward Fitz Street, and then onto Broadway. Like the corner of like Fitz Street. No, not Broadway. Fitz Street and what was it? Lawrence Street. That's right. Fitz Street and Lawrence. And there was a convenience store there. Well, there were a few of them. And he goes, "Marky, we're going to go inside here. We're going to just shop." So we went in there, and he goes, "Marky, pick what you want." So I got bazooka, bubblegum, a squeeze tube. I got candy, chips, sodas, you name it. And we brought it back to my house, and I ate it while watching TV and video and movies. So that's one of the memories I had left out over the years with Harold. And then in 2001, I believe it was in November, it was Harold's 70th birthday. So that was like the last time I saw the whole family together before, I moved home, and then I went to Helen's wake in 2021. That was the last time I saw them together again. And I remember Harold was drinking. He was enjoying his alcohol, and my dad was there, I was there, and a few of his family members. And then he turns, he looks at my dad, smiles, and he goes, "This guy over here, this guy is my best buddy, my best friend." And that's something I'll always remember. I mean, they were like the best of buddies when I was growing up. My dad had two very close best friends. His boss, Valentino, from Cardinal Shoe. Valentino's almost 90 right now in 2000. He's going to be 90 in 2025. And Harold Little. And they were like grandparents to me, grandfathers over the years, both of them. And their wives were like grandmothers. So Harold and Helen were like my butchie, like I said, my butchie and my grampy. Helen loved a good time. She loved hosting parties. She loved telling jokes. She loved a good time, laughing, telling jokes, and she loved to play bingo. And Harold loved his alcohol, and he loved helping to fix things. So those are the memories I remember of Butchie Helen and Grampy Harold.